Good afternoon. My name is Gillian Balaban and I am the Standards Assistant at GRI. Welcome to this meeting of the Global Sustainability Standards Board, known by its acronym, the GSSB, held on 7 February 2019. This virtual meeting is being hosted from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Please note that all public GSSB meetings are being recorded and you can find the audio recording on the GSSB website along with high-level summaries of previous GSSB meetings. Present from the GRI Secretariat today are Bastian Buck, Chief of Standards, Lara Espinash, Senior Manager Standards Division, Madir Aliva, Senior Sector Manager Standards Division, Pamela Carpio, Senior Coordinator Governance Relations, and Sarah Jane Dominic, Senior Manager Standards. We will now do a roll call. Corey LaRue.
Present.
Thank you. Evan Harvey.
Hello.
Hello, thank you. Gustavo Sinner.
Hello to everyone.
Thank you. Jennifer Prinsing.
Hello.
Thank you. Kent Swift.
Present.
Thank you. Kirsten Marguerite Hoovey.
Present.
Thank you. Loredana Carter.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Michelle Washer.
Yes, present. It's better when I go unmute.
That helps, Michelle. Thank you. Ramakrishnan Venkateswaran.
Yes, good afternoon to everybody.
Good afternoon, thank you. And Vice Chair Robin Leeson.
Yes, present.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. GSSB members Julia Wilson, Peter Colley and Vincent Kong sent their apologies. Chair Judy Koskefti will join later. I will now hand over to Vice Chair Robin Leeson to open the meeting.
Thank you. I will sit in for Judy for a short time. She has been called away. So I will chair the first couple of items on the agenda. We have quite a full agenda to cover with this meeting, including some key decisions about the sector program, also the introduction to new members. So initially I'd like to welcome all of our new members. We will sort of go to you in turn shortly under the second item, so you're able to introduce yourselves. We will get on to the sector program after that, and then the review of the human rights related standards, which is a significant piece of work which has been going on for some time. So I'm expecting that will take up a fair bit of the time for the meeting. Just to go to item one on the agenda, which is the approval of the draft summary from our virtual meeting on the 29th of November. If anybody has any comments or corrections or queries regarding the summary of the draft summary of the meeting, please raise your hand or feel free to make a comment in the type box. Okay, I'm not hearing any comments or seeing anything being typed, so I'll assume that those the draft is being accepted and approved, and that we can move on to the next item on the agenda. The next item on the agenda is introduction to new members. So I would like to welcome our new members. If you can refer to the paper on item 2 on the agenda, which has a short CV for each of our new members, and without putting you on the spot too much, I would like to just briefly go to each of our new members to ask them to do a short introduction, starting in order. If Corley, if you would like to say a few words of introduction about yourself and your background and your interest in sustainability reporting, that would be much appreciated.
Thank you, Robin. Hello, everyone. It really is a privilege for me to be able to join you today and to join the GSSB. My background is I have legal training, but I spent 21 years of my career at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, working with companies and investors across the investment value chain around sustainability reporting, integrated reporting and the like. Most of you I don't know. I know Evan from my interactions with the World Federation and the Sustainable Stock Exchanges Initiative. So it will be lovely to meet everyone and to see Evan again. My interest in sustainability is really stemming from a passion to influence the way that business leaders think about business and sustainability in the longer term. My passion particularly extends to developing countries such as South Africa and beyond, across the African continent. And I really look forward to be able to learn from the GSSB and to be able to share also what is happening in our neck of the woods. I left the JSE in September 2017, and since then I have been doing some independent consulting work, mainly around reporting, but also around stakeholder management and strategy development. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Corley. We look forward to meeting you very, very soon. And Gustavo, could you perhaps say a few words about your background and your interest in sustainability reporting?
Hello to everyone. Well, I'm from AG Sustentable, a consultancy firm from Argentina. And we are working together, GRI, for almost 10 years with reporting. GRI reports for many companies, and also we are GRI data partners from 2012. And we were part of a community leader program, the pilot program from GRI for Argentina. We also here in Argentina, we are members of the board of the local network for the Global Compact. Well, we believe that working together with GRI in accountability and reports make a change for the companies. So that's a small part of we work.
Great. Thank you, Gustavo. Jennifer.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be joining you. I am happy to be part of the business enterprise. Been working first with Dow Corning and now with Dow Chemical for the past couple of years. I'm an engineer by training, but have been a full-time sustainability professional for now over 10 years, reporting for most of that time using the GRI. I've also done quite a bit of the technical work around sustainability, conducting life cycle assessments, and have quite a bit of experience with not only the GRI, but other sustainability ratings assessments, such as the Dow Jones and CDP, EcoVadis, and many others. So my interest around reporting is really making the activity of reporting impactful, valuable to not only their stakeholders, but the businesses who put the effort into the reporting activities. And I'm very pleased to be able to learn from all of you and to get started. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Loredana, are you able to say a few words as well?
Yes, with pleasure, yes. I'm a lawyer with the ITUC, the International Trade Union Confederation in Brussels, where I'm in charge of developing policies to promote workers' rights worldwide and at national level as well. I'm deeply involved with the international supervisory mechanisms, including the ILO in Geneva, where I actually worked for several years, 7 years to be exact, as a legal expert on different topics. And so, well, as you all know, I'm replacing Dwight, who retired. So those are big shoes to fill, but I'm really looking forward to engaging in this important task. To me, sustainable reporting is actually quite an interesting initiative, because there's growing awareness and interest in ensuring that we take into account the impacts of activities and of corporations worldwide. So for the labor movement and from myself, this is a very interesting initiative that gathers all stakeholders in one setting. So I'm looking forward to our discussions and to developing impactful standards for reporting. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. I understand Peter Colley is an apology for this meeting, so I'll ask Rama to perhaps say a few words.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I am Rama Krishnan. I work with the World Bank in the World Bank's Governance Global Practice. I'm currently based in Zambia. It's a privilege to be part of this group at the GSSB. My career has been in governance and public sector management. Prior to joining the World Bank, I worked in the civil service in India, in local governments and state-owned enterprises. From the interest in joining the GSSB, from the World Bank perspective, we consider sustainability reporting as an important instrument to strengthen transparency and accountability of organizations, especially in the public sector. At the GSSB, I would like to bring in that developing country perspective to standard setting, as well as to contribute to taking the GRI standards and principles to the developing countries that the World Bank works in. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ramakrishnan, and thank you again to all of the new members. We all look forward to meeting you in person very, very soon, and for all of the contributions that you'll make to the GSSB. So thank you again for your time. I'd like to move now to session 3 on the sector program. So if we can look at items 3, 4, 5 and 6 in your papers, I'll hand over to Bastian for a presentation and discussion on the sector program.
Sorry, Robin, this is Jill. Unfortunately, on the roll call, I missed out Tony. So, Tony, are you present?
Oh. Yeah, I'm here.
I'm so sorry. A typo error. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Tony. Sorry for the oversight.
It's okay.
Hello, everyone. This is Bastian. We're now moving to the presentation of the sector program, and the bulk of this presentation will be given by Madea. I just wanted to open with a couple of remarks. For those of you that have served on the GSB last year, you are acutely aware that in the November meeting, we had presented next to the sector program description that is coming back to you today, a sector pilot project proposal for mining. This is not coming back to you today. It's not tabled for approval, and I want to give a brief explanation of why that is. After the meeting and after your approval of the initial draft of the sector pilot project proposal to be sent to the GRI board and the stakeholder council, a key stakeholder to this project, the International Council on Metals and Mining, Mining and Metals, has contacted us with the request to consider to delay this project by 1 calendar year. This in relation to their ability to join the project in 2019. They signaled to us that they would like to be represented on a senior level in this project and have the right resources in place to support the project throughout, and that they were given decisions that were taken already at their end by the time that we approved the project proposal. They were not able to commit these resources in 2019. In discussion with the GSB chair, Judy, we have decided to postpone the sector pilot project on mining and to present today, in addition to the oil and gas sector project proposal that we had announced already, a sector proposal for agriculture sector and one for textiles and apparel. Just for a little bit more background for those of you that haven't followed the developments of the GRI guidelines in the past, the ICMM has worked over a number of years with GRI to develop guidance for the mining and metals sector. The ICMM has importantly also mandated GRI reporting for their membership, and they have been a key player and key collaboration partner for GRI in driving more transparency in the mining and metal sector. And that basically, that background and that legacy that we have with them, and also the belief that they are the right partner to be involved in devising mining sector standards, has led to the conclusion that we want to postpone the project at this stage. Thank you. I will hand over to Madea now, who will walk us through the overview of the contents that we're presenting, and then with her we will dive into the details of the program. Thank you.
Thank you, Bastian, and thank you, Robin. I'm going to start with the sector program materials. New GSSB members, I'm very happy to meet you, and I look forward to working with you. On the agenda, I just want to give an update on the team because the team is beginning to grow and we have some new members. I would also like to give an update on the activities of the GSSB subcommittee, which is represented by Kirsten Hovey and by Vincent Kong and by Evan Harvey, who have been very patient working with us through details. Then we will discuss the sector program description. As Bastian stated, this is coming around for the second time.
And look, do we have the secretariat online? I can't hear. I've just had a note that others can't hear me.
All of you were able to hear me, my contribution. No, I cannot hear the secretariat either.
I think we may have lost the secretariat.
I hope not. Let's give them.
Oh yes, Pamela. I just sort of note Pamela can hear us, but we can't hear secretariat.
No, there must be an issue with the microphone there. Let's give them a moment to fix that. Pamela, Jill,
yes.
Participants in the call cannot hear the secretariat.
How about now? Is it a microphone issue?
We can hear everything else, I think.
Yeah, we can hear each other by the sounds of it. Yes.
So maybe while the Secretariat is trying to reconnect, I can give a brief outline of what we plan to do in this session 3 on the sector program. There will be a brief update on the team that we've gathered by now, recent recruitments that have come in. We will talk about the discussions of the GSB subcommittee, and then dive into a brief program update and importantly tabling the sector program description that has been with the SC and GI board for feedback for approval. Further, we will discuss as item 4, 5, and 6 the oil and gas sector standard, the agriculture sector standard, and the textiles and apparel sector standard proposals. All 3 are presented today for approval to be sent to the Stakeholder Council and the GI board as per due process. We want to end then on next steps and what you can expect in upcoming meetings in relation to the sector program. And with that, I will try to give back to the Secretariat.
Do we have the Secretariat online?
The technical issues seem to persist. Can I ask the Secretary to call in by phone and just for the speaker? I think that's the easiest solution now. apologies to the members of the GSB. That is actually, I think, a first that the Secretariat is not able to contribute. Usually we have problems connecting individual members of the GSSB. Madeira.
Is it working now? Oh.
Just give me a phone, any phone.
Okay.
I think this is not working. To the Secretariat, can one of you please step out of that room and call in and give the presentation externally, because there is an echo in the room and this won't work. Hello, who has just joined?
Hi, this is Madeira. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I apologize for that.
Unfortunately, we still have the echo, Madeira, at least for some of us.
Okay,
it's not too
bad
now?
Are you still in the same room, or have you stepped out of the room?
I'm still in the same room. I'm calling by cell phone.
That won't be possible. So you have to leave the room, because it seems to be that the microphone is still picking up some of the conversation. So you have to give the presentation from a different room.
Okay. In that case, I will be walking up to the division and.
No, I think just go next door, and because we don't have the time for more delay.
Okay. Okay, I'm next door. I will go ahead. I don't have the clicker for the presentation, but I'll assume that someone is watching and clicking along with us. So I'm going to begin with
if you can indicate the slide number, then this should be working just fine.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to begin with a team update. Okay, sorry for this. The team members, I'm going to introduce myself first. I'm Madeira Olivar, Senior Manager of the Sector Program. I joined in last August. Also on the Sector Program team, we have Karen Williams, who joined in November as Senior Coordinator. And most recently, just in the last month, we have two more joiners, Nora Puro, who has been at GRI for a couple of years and comes to us from the Communications Department, and Margarita Lysenkova, who was most recently with a pharmaceutical company in Brussels. These are the two sector project managers. Nora is intended to work on oil and gas, and Margarita is intended to work on agriculture. Next, I'd like to give an update on our subcommittee, who has been very patient working with us on a lot of details about potential requirements for the sector program, about other work that we should look at and how we should leverage it. So some of the topics that we've covered in recent months include sector prioritization, and we have a clear direction on high priority sectors that we intend to consider in the near future, including oil and gas and agriculture and textiles and apparel, for which you have proposals today, as well as automotive, banking, chemicals, and utilities and other sectors. We've also discussed potential reporting obligations of sector standards, and I think this isn't necessarily a final argument, but at present, the feeling is that the requirements related to sector standards are likely to be similar to G4, sector disclosures content, which would not require companies to explain if they choose not to report on an issue identified within a sector standard. We have also discussed a lot of product features, and I won't go into those in detail, but just to say that we are incorporating all of the feedback that we have received and are working that into a template to be shared with the subcommittee at our next meeting later in February. And then finally, we have talked in more detail about the G4 sector disclosures and what might be needed if those are to be retired with the release of new sector contents. And we are still working out further details on that topic. So I did want to just say thank you to Evan and Kirsten and Vincent. We've had a few technical difficulties on those calls as well, which we are still trying to iron out, but their feedback has been very valuable. Next, I would like to speak about the sector program description and the comments that we received from the Stakeholder Council on the initial draft. Also to thank the Stakeholder Council. The feedback was quite valuable, and it did result in changes to the draft. And you can see those in the record of changes that's presented in the sector program description. I just want to summarize these briefly. The Stakeholder Council recommended that the sector program build on and be informed by learnings from the G4 sector disclosures. Stakeholder Council also suggested that we simplify certain text in the sector program description to make the overall rationale clearer. The Stakeholder Council also wanted a clearer explanation of the connection of the sector program to further standards development and how that would work within the division. The Stakeholder Council also requested an inclusion of a sectoral benchmark analysis, but that we did not feel to be pragmatic at this point in this sector program description. The Stakeholder Council also asked whether the program would separate global issues from sector-specific ones. That, again, is a point that the Standards Division does not recommend that we make that distinction. In addition, the Stakeholder Council asked that the process include additional consultation outside of a project working group. But the way that we would expect to answer this request is that it's the public comment period within the due process that satisfies this requirement. In addition, the Stakeholder Council requested that we include academics in project working groups and wanted to give us recommendations on these, and the Standards Division welcomes that. We think this would add high value to participants in the process. Finally, the Stakeholder Council requested that the Standards Division make it clearer that the significance of a sector's impact is the overriding criterion for prioritization. And the Standards Division supports this. We amended the text accordingly. In addition, the Stakeholder Council supported the recommendation not to adopt an external classification, but did have some concerns, and these are logged in the full stakeholder comments at the back of the sector program description. The Stakeholder Council also suggested that SASB's Sustainable Industry Classification System be included in sector keys. So this brings us to a decision and perhaps some discussion of whether the GSSB is ready to approve item 3, the sector program description, or whether further changes or amendments are needed.
Thank you. We can throw that open to those questions now, either by voice or in the text box. If anyone has any points of clarification or feedback before we consider approval of the overall program description.
Kirsten here. It's just to mention that it seems to be to have been some errors in the changes since the previous version on page 2. That goes from line 28 and downwards.
If I can address that, Robin. Thank you, Kirsten. We detected this, unfortunately, after distribution. It has been corrected. So in the document that's in the public, the line numbers are correct at this point.
Thank you.
I did have one question myself as well. Just to clarify, I'm a little confused. The program is anticipating two types of outputs, like the sector standard itself, but there may also be other topic-specific standards generated that aren't currently covered in the existing suite of standards. Is that correct?
I think to clarify, Robin, if we think about the sector program generating issues and descriptions, some of the issues and descriptions for issues identified as material for a sector may be issues that are not currently covered in the GRI standards. So it may point to a need to develop a GRI standard for an issue that has not yet been identified.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay.
Were there any other questions at this point? So I'm assuming the GSSB approve this item. Have someone prepared to support? Everyone is prepared to support that. Unless we hear some dissent, we're approving the item 3. Okay. Good. I'm assuming we now move on to the next item on the sector description that we've resolved.
Okay, thank you, Ron.
Yep, the oil and gas sector standard, which is item 4.
Yes, so we have, just for context, the oil and gas sector standard, this is the first time that this has come to the GSSB for those of you who are new, which means that we are not asking for a final approval for this document. We are asking for an approval to send to the board and stakeholder council in accordance with due process. So the question we have today is, does the GSSB approve item 4, the project proposal for an oil and gas sector standard, to send to the GRI board and stakeholder council for feedback?
Just had a question from Kirsten. Would you like to speak to that, Kirsten?
I had a...
Yeah, just learning from our experiences with the mining and with ICMM. Has IPECA been consulted in the oil and gas sector standard?
IPECA is aware that this proposal is in the public domain, and I have spoken with them by phone. So they are supportive of this project and are interested in participating.
Great, thank you.
Yes, I believe, Judy, you're back online?
Yes, I am. Hello, and thank you. And I'm very grateful to the Vice Chair for stepping in for me for that time. If you'd like to carry on and just let me know when is the best time to, I can either support you as Vice Chair for the rest of the meeting or it doesn't matter. But please just carry on with the conversation.
That's okay. I can hand over to, I think we had just asked for any comments or questions about where we're at with the oil and gas sector standard proposal to at least go to the GRI board and stakeholder council for feedback in its current form.
Great.
So that's probably where I can hand back over to you. Just I think we'd covered a couple of key questions, but there was then some. I think we almost exhausted that one anyway, okay. So we're ready to sort of approve that.
That's lovely. Thank you very much. Can I just inquire, did we have a quorum to approve the meeting summary earlier in the discussion?
Yes,
or do we have to?
Yes.
We did. Okay.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. Wonderful. Yes.
That's done.
Excellent. Great. Fine. So as I don't want to cause even more disruption, please just carry on where we were at this point. If there are any further questions or comments with respect to this draft project proposal. And if not, I think we can safely assume that this is then approved for distribution to the GRI board and stakeholder council for feedback. Yes? Good. Okay. I think are we still with you, Madir? Is that the idea? You still have more to your discussion here.
Yes. So one follow-up
please.
question for oil and gas is whether the GSSB has any suggestions on other organizations or experts for potential membership in a project working group.
Is that an open question for a period of time, or does it require a confirmation now in the meeting?
Open question that can be answered by email later if these organizations occur to you.
Okay, I think that is a helpful thing to leave with the GSSB members, and we might put a time frame around returning to it, making sure that people have sent in any suggestions that they have.
Okay, I think any time in the next month before the March 7th meeting is a good time frame for that.
Very good.
Okay, I think we can move on to next, the agriculture sector standard, where we have the same question as for oil and gas. Does the GSSB approve item 5, the project proposal for an agriculture sector standard, to send to the GRI board and stakeholder council for feedback?
Okay, discussion of this one. Anyone have any questions? I think there might be one coming in. No? Any queries?
Yes, I just had a question about to what extent, I know we've included talking about food products. I was just interested to hear about how encompassing this project would be in terms of the overall value chain of agriculture versus food processing in that sense. And I mean, that may be, that sort of scope may be something that the project working group addresses very early on, unless it's something that's already been fleshed out or decided. But I was just not that clear in the paper about where that might start and end. Does it extend all the way to food retailers, and does it go all the way back to the processes of animal feed, for example?
Thank you, Robin. So in terms of how far does it extend all the way to food retail? The intention is that there would likely be several reports for the food sector, and that this would be the first. So agriculture really being the upstream raising of livestock and raising of crops. I think with meat production, it gets a little bit interesting since most of those organizations also process meat. And then the idea would be that there would be subsequent reports on food processing and then potentially also on food retail. So I agree with you that some of it, the project working group is likely to weigh in, and there may be certain shifts that are made in the scope of the project if their expertise indicates that it's the right thing to do. There's only a certain distance that we can see up front before entering the project. And as we run subsequent projects and work with these groups, it will be easier to be more proactive about drawing the lines and the boundaries of the sector. So we do see a need to seek additional feedback, I think particularly as we get into sectors that have difficult outlines. and to seek feedback up front on those. But I think for agriculture, there was feedback that agriculture itself is quite a large, there are a lot of issues to discuss, and perhaps these are different from issues that occur later in food retail.
Great, thank you.
Are there additional questions?
Any others? Okay. Well, I will simply ask the question at this point. If there are no further questions or discussion on this, we'd like to clarify: does the GSSB agree to approve the project proposal for an agriculture sector standard to send to the GRI board and stakeholder council for feedback? Any objections? Hearing none, I think that's now approved, Midir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, I have the same question on recommendations for organizations or experts, but as with oil and gas, if you don't have these ready in hand today to recommend, please write to us afterwards in the next month before the March 7th meeting, and let us know if you can think of organizations who should be involved in the project working group.
Thank you.
Finally, we have a third proposal for a sector standard for textiles and apparel. Now, the status of this is a little bit different from the first two. So for the first two, we have managers here who are ready to run these projects. For textiles and apparel, this is more of a next in line. And we do see that it's quite advantageous to bring a proposal forward in advance of the project manager arriving, because then when the project manager arrives, we can get started immediately. So you will note that this proposal does not have a set timeline. It doesn't have a set start date. But this is essentially in the lineup so that if there were to be hitches in one of the other two, or scheduling difficulties of some time, that we know where we're headed next. So we have the same question here, whether the GSSB approves Item 6, the project proposal for a textiles and apparel sector standard, to be sent to the GRI board and stakeholder council for feedback.
Any discussion or questions? Okay, shall we ask the approval question on this one then, please? Does the GSSB agree to approve the project proposal for a textiles and apparel sector standard to be sent to the GRI board and stakeholder council for feedback? If no objections, I'll wait a moment. Okay. Hearing none, hearing no comments, I believe that is that's carried. Thank you.
And then again, the same question for textiles and apparel. If you have recommendations on organizations or experts who should be involved in a project working group, please let us know. Thank you very much. This concludes the updates on the sector program. I just have outlined a couple of next steps that we look to have the approvals, to which I believe we have received today, for the sector program description and the project proposals. And then on March 7th, the proposals for the individual sectors will come around again for a final approval once we have considered feedback from the GRI board and stakeholder council.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, Midir, thank you very much for your assistance on the call today, but also obviously for your leadership on the sector program up to this point. It's much appreciated. I believe we are turning. Thank you. I believe we are turning it over to Laura and/or to Sarah Jane on the standards division team to talk us through the review of the human rights related standards project. Yes.
Thank you, Judy. This is Laura. I hope you can hear me okay.
A warm welcome to all of the new GSSB members and to all of the other GSSB members. We look forward to continuing the collaboration with all of you over the coming year. The aim of this session now is to update the GSSB on the progress made with updating the human rights related standards and to share our proposed next steps in the process. There are three objectives for this session now. First, to present the recommendations of the Human Rights Technical Committee on how to revise the human rights related standards, to approve an additional member to join the Technical Committee following the departure of both GSSB sponsors for this project, and to approve the draft project proposal for revising the universal standards, which is our proposed next step for implementing the recommendations of the Technical Committee. We will discuss one item at a time. I will present the first two items, items 7 and 8, and then my colleague Sarah Jane will present the last item, item 9. So next, before we start, I wanted to do a brief recap of the project itself and the key objectives for the benefit of the new GSSB members. Back in 2017, 2 years ago, the GSSB started a project to revise the human rights related standards. The project has two primary objectives. First, to bring the human rights standards more in line with the key authoritative instruments in this area, particularly the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights and the OECD Guidelines for Multinational Enterprises. And secondly, to update the range of topic-specific standards that we have on human rights, such as those looking at non-discrimination or forced labor, to ensure that they reflect current best practice. Given the wide scope of this review, the project is being divided into two phases. Phase 1, which is where we are now, consists in a holistic review of the human rights contents in the GRI standards, and overall alignment with key instruments. The GSSB convened a technical committee of business and human rights experts for this first phase, and they have been developing recommendations over the last year. The second phase will then look at updating the individual topic-specific standards on human rights and developing new standards as needed. So the technical committee has been working since January of last year to develop recommendations on how to update the human rights related standards. And they have developed recommendations in 4 key areas. First, they have developed a set of human rights disclosures in line with the UN Guiding Principles and other key instruments. Then they have issued advice on whether and how key concepts in those instruments could be expanded to other areas of the GRI standards beyond human rights. And this was requested in light of the work done by the OECD to expand key concepts such as due diligence to other areas of sustainable development, such as the environment. And the committee was also requested to issue advice on how to align the reporting principles in line with the expectations formulated in those instruments and how to revise the human rights topic-specific standards. These recommendations are presented in item 7, and I will briefly summarize them next. It is important to point out, though, that these recommendations are presented for information and discussion at this stage and not for approval. As noted in item 7, these recommendations have implications for the 3 universal standards, and that's why our proposed next step to implement these recommendations is to have a look at revising the universal standards, and that's an item that Sarah Jane will present a bit later in this session. We won't have enough time during the meeting today to dive into the recommendations of the technical committee. I will go through them at a very high level and take any clarification questions from GSSB members, but we will make ample time at the in-person meeting in March to go through these recommendations in detail and to get your comments and questions. So the recommendations are divided into three main areas. First, the committee has developed a set of disclosures for reporting on human rights. They focus on how an organization meets its responsibility to respect human rights and on how it addresses its negative impacts. There are 6 disclosures in total that are divided into 3 groups. There are 2 disclosures on policies and governance for addressing human rights impacts, which look at the presence of a policy commitment to respect human rights and how that policy commitment is embedded throughout the organization. Then 2 other disclosures on the general processes in place for addressing human rights, which look at stakeholder engagement and remediation processes and grievance mechanisms. And finally, 2 disclosures on due diligence and remedy for addressing material human rights topics, which look at the material human rights topics and how those were identified, and then the actions to prevent, mitigate, and remediate human rights impacts for each material human rights topic. These disclosures are aligned with the UN Guiding Principles and the OECD instruments, and as you can see, they are of qualitative nature. You can find the specific reporting requirements and corresponding guidance developed for each in Section 1 of Item 7. A field test of these disclosures was carried out last summer, where we collected and responded to initial feedback from stakeholders and other practitioners on these disclosures. Next, the committee has recommended that the 6 disclosures be required for all companies reporting in accordance with the GRI standards. And that would be consistent with the expectation in the guiding principles that all companies everywhere have a responsibility to respect human rights and should communicate how they do that in practice. The committee was also asked to consider whether the disclosures could be helpful for reporting on any economic, environmental, and social topic, so not just for human rights. And they have indicated that following the work that the OECD has done, that indeed these disclosures and concepts could be expanded to other areas of the GRI standards, and have advised that GRI 103, the management approach standard, could be updated to be aligned more closely with the expectation of due diligence. Next, the committee has also recommended to revise the GRI reporting principles for the finding report content holder and significant impact with the OECD instruments, making impact the primary consideration in a materiality assessment over and above the opinions and views of stakeholders, and emphasizing certain concepts such as the focus on risks to people and the environment, the assessment of potential impacts in addition to actual impacts, business relationships, and the perspective of affected stakeholders. And finally, the committee was also asked to consider whether there would be value in having topic-specific standards on human rights topics in addition to the disclosures that they have developed. There was no unanimous recommendation on this. There were a number of arguments made for and against having topic-specific standards, which you can see described in detail in Section 3 of Item 7. For example, those in favor of having topic-specific standards suggested that they could make reporting on a topic more clear and more relevant, whilst those again suggested that the disclosures developed by the committee are already sufficient, and that developing additional standards would only increase the reporting burden for companies and lead to a tick-the-box approach to human rights reporting. There was, however, strong support from all members to develop optional reporting guidance on human rights topics. It was further noted that the existing topic standards on human rights are not useful in conjunction with the disclosures that the committee has developed, and that they should be reviewed and cross-checked against the new disclosures to see if anything remains of value. If there is nothing of value left, the advice is that those standards should be deleted or revised depending on whether the GSSB decides to have topic standards on human rights going forward. Finally, some committee members suggested that where a human right is considered universally relevant for all companies or enables the realization of other human rights, for example, collective bargaining, freedom of association, or non-discrimination, that it may be appropriate to have those topics as mandatory for all companies to report on. However, this was not supported unanimously within the committee, and there were also differences of opinions as to which human rights would be considered universally relevant or to be enabling rights. As mentioned, we will make ample time during the in-person meeting in March to discuss these recommendations in more detail, and in a moment we will also explain the proposed next steps for this project. But for now, I wanted to stop here to see if there are any questions from the GSSB, and we would also like to invite GSSB members to suggest any elements of these recommendations for which you would like to get more background on or discuss at more length in March. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Judy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura. Okay, so that's our next step here, is to share any questions or observations that we might have for some further discussion, and also the recommendations for the in-person meeting that we have coming up in March. I have a comment or a question from Kirsten Hofi on the chat window. One question for clarification. Could you please remind us about the representation of the different constituencies in the technical committee? Laura?
Sure, and I'm happy to share the overview of members in the technical committee with GSSB members following this call. We have 10 members in the technical committee at the moment. 4 fall in the mediating institution constituency. Then we have 2 business representatives, 2 civil society representatives, 1 labor representative, and finally 1 investment/report user member.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, yes, Kirsten, raising your hand. Please go ahead.
Thank you. I have read through the recommendations with great interest and some worries. First of all, it goes to the suggestion that these disclosures should be required for all organizations preparing a report in accordance with the GRI standards. And my main concern here is that would then even include all small and medium-sized enterprises. As I see the proposed disclosures, some of them are fine, in particular for large organizations. Other of the disclosures are very, very detailed and might be difficult even to large organizations and not least to smaller organizations. Examples of that is if you go to line 288, disclosure number 2, AI. How responsibility for implementing the policy commitment is allocated across different levels within the organization. When you look into the details, into the guidance, whether and if so, which human rights topics are formally discussed at meetings of the highest governance body, or by senior executives, including the discussion of any severe negative human rights impacts identified. I think we should be very careful about giving that detailed level of guidance, because it creates lots of complications on how to report on that, in particular for organizations that are not very experienced in reporting. Another example is the reporting requirements as listed on line 438, where it says the reporting organization shall report the following information: any commitments the organization has made to provide for, or etc., etc. The approach taken, including any grievance mechanisms and any other processes. The word any here is most problematic. So I really suggest to look further into this. This is about either drop any or include some kind of qualification here. So any material commitments, etc. If you go to page 18, where they have included such a qualifying word, under line 538, AI, any severe actual and potential, that makes a lot of difference to give meaningful reporting. Going further down there in the same disclosure 5, how the organization has identified actual and potential negative human rights impacts in which it is or could be involved. That's pretty tough. And then in item 4 here, why any human rights topics that are commonly associated with the types of activities the organization carries out or with the context in which they take place have not been identified as material. This is really a handful to experienced reporters, and I can't think about it for the small and medium-sized enterprises. Thank you.
Can I ask, from the standards division, does that sound like it's suggesting a few things for discussion in the March meeting, or is there anything we can clarify further at this meeting with respect to the points that Kirsten has just raised?
Indeed, I think this gives us a lot of input for us to prepare the session at the in-person meeting in March. I think we can present in a bit more detail the rationale of the technical committee for suggesting to require all of these disclosures from all companies. And what I think it would be helpful for us is to collect the more detailed comments from all GSSB members to help us prepare for the session in March. And one thing that I haven't yet discussed is the next steps, which will also include giving this feedback back to the technical committee. So there will be a chance in the next few months to take all of this feedback to the technical committee for them to consider any changes that they would like to make to the recommendation. So the comments are very helpful, and I leave it up to you, Judy, if you want to collect more comments now, or whether we invite comments in writing, or ask for additional elements. Yeah.
I was going to do that. Just simply invite the GSSB members to raise any observations that they have now, and obviously to reflect during the intervening period on anything that further occurs to them. And as we prepare the agenda and the preparation background materials for the March meeting, it would be very helpful to hear your further reflections. Robin Leeson raising her hand. Yes, go ahead, Robin.
Thanks, G. Yeah, I did just want to put perhaps on the agenda when we have our face-to-face meeting the words that have been presented in on page 18, line 542 to 546. I think my understanding was that earlier on the technical committee were having significant discussions around the relationship between concepts like salience and materiality, and those lines imply that the technical committee is comfortable with equating risk, salience, and impact as a way of understanding what constitutes a material human rights topic. It would be good to get just a little bit of feedback on that, but also perhaps have on the agenda for our face-to-face meeting the nature of the discussion that's occurred and where they landed on salience and materiality as two key concepts between the frameworks.
Thank you. Any thoughts in response, Laura, or would you like to just collect that for further discussion?
I think this is maybe a topic that deserves a bit more of time than the time that we have during this call. So we will definitely add this to the list of items to discuss at the in-person meeting in March. If I can just briefly summarize the outcome of the discussion so far within the technical committee, which are expanded in a bit more detail later on in the paper on page 35. So where we landed is that the various instruments we've looked at use different terminology, and some of that terminology has been in some context interpreted to mean different things. So the term risk or the term salient, for example, but where we ended within the technical committee is that all of those frameworks are aiming at the same thing, which is to focus on the impacts of a company on people's human rights and looking at different defining criteria to determine which impacts to report on. So primarily severity, but also likelihood. And that the use of a particular terminology, there were very different opinions within the technical committee as to which terminology we should be using. But ultimately, they said it's up to the GSSB to make a choice. We've outlined some of the reasons for and against put forth by the technical committee for using one term or the other on page 35. And that's one of the questions that the GSSB needs to pick up when revising the universal standards, because the choice of terminology, of this type of terminology, is not only relevant to the human rights discussion, but for the GRI standards overall. So that's in short where we have landed on the question of significant material salience and so forth. And we will make more time in March to present the views of the technical committee in a bit more detail and to engage the GSSB in a discussion around these key concepts and terminology.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Kirsten has another comment to make. Kirsten, please.
Thank you. It's on page 23, line 712, C3, where it says evidence, including stakeholder feedback on the effectiveness of grievance mechanisms and other remediation processes. And first was a bit confused about what was meant here. with including stakeholder feedback. So I was looking into the guidance, and there is no guidance on this topic. So I'm still just as confused on what is meant here. Also on C4, key lessons learned from the actions taken and how these have been incorporated into the organization's operational policies and procedures. I'd just like to remind that it's expected that all reporting organizations should report on everything here. And this one, there isn't even a qualification saying that if there has been any. So it seems like it requires that the organization have had incidents, and if you haven't, you have to prove that you are not guilty. It's a bit strange approach for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Any others? Laura, any immediate thoughts in response?
No, thank you for those comments. I think what would be helpful is to get a bit more detail from GSSB members about those comments, so that we can take them back to the technical committee, and also ensure that there's enough discussion within the GSSB in March about those comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further questions or items people would like to discuss on this? Okay, I think unless anyone raises another one in the next few moments, I think we can say thank you very much to Laura. Let me just say, I need to refresh my memory on what's next in the agenda. Pardon me. Laura, help me out if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, the next is item 8, which is the proposed appointment of an additional member to the technical committee. So I can kick that off.
Thank you. Okay? Please go ahead.
Yep. So as you may know, the GSSB had appointed 2 of its members as sponsors for this project. The role of a GSSB sponsor is to observe and follow the progress of an expert group, and to help represent their views back to the full GSSB. Both members who were following the progress of this project left the GSSB at the end of 2018. And given that the work of this committee is still undergoing but not yet concluded, and to ensure continuity in the project and in helping represent the views of the expert group back to the GSSB, we would like to propose that the GSSB appoints Dwight Justice, who was one of the GSSB sponsors, as a member of this technical committee. In addition, we will be looking to add a new GSSB sponsor for this project. And given the close link between this project and the next project that we will present on the universal standards, we would like to propose that one GSSB member follows both this work and the work of on the universal standards. And that should help balance the number of GSSB and technical committee members and ensure the necessary continuity for this project. So that's outlined in more detail in item 8, where you can also see Dwight's biography and relevant experience in the field of human rights and sustainability reporting. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Judy, to collect any comments or questions from GSSB members.
Thank you, Laura. Can I ask, just to be clear about sort of the timing and the process of sort of overlapping new GSSB sponsors with the current ongoing work? You rightly pointed out that this work is still ongoing. Is the proposal to add Dwight as a member of the technical committee, is that open-ended, or is there a time frame around it? In other words, how close are we to the next phase of work when there may need to be a completely different approach taken to working groups versus technical committees and so forth? Can we just have a little bit more context? That would be very helpful, I think.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure. So we expect that the work of the technical committee will carry on for another year. The project itself will now be paused to be able to have a look at the universal standards. Once the review of the universal standards is completed, which we will present our proposed approach in a moment, the aim is to go for public comment on all of the changes to the universal standards and the human rights together. And after the public comment, the technical committee would reconvene to go over the public feedback and finalize the recommendations to the GSSB. So the appointment of Dwight Justice would be to serve on the technical committee until the technical committee has completed its work, and we estimate that will be another year. And then the GSSB sponsor that we would be looking to add to follow both projects. Both projects would be in a way staggered, so that GSSB member would in the next few months be primarily involved in revising the universal standards, and following the public comment period would then follow the progress of the technical committee, while at the same time following the changes that are being made to the universal standards following the public comment. Sorry, I don't have a graph to outline all of the steps, and it may be a bit confusing at the moment, but hopefully that gives you a high-level overview of the expected involvement of both the new members to be appointed to the technical committee and the new GSSB sponsor for this project.
Thank you very much, Laura. Any other questions from GSSB members or discussion about this matter, or further clarification for that matter? We do have a comment from Kirsten expressing full support for the appointment of Dwight Justice as proposed here. Kent Swift would like to make a point. Please, Kent.
Yeah, this is just kind of a general comment about the human rights area. Is, we're being asked to absorb an awful lot today. I don't know if we're going to be asked to actually make any decisions today, but I'm hoping that we will set aside adequate time at the in-person meeting to discuss these matters, because I think there's some far-reaching issues here.
Would you like to add some detail around that so that we can figure out how to prepare for it?
Yeah, if we're going to go back and change general principles, that's going to take a lot of thought, for one thing. And also, I guess I have to spend a bit more time, and I will connect with Laura on this. But my question is, when we look at this human rights standard as in sort of the way it's being proposed, is it really concise? Is it something that someone's going to be able to sit down and read and really get some meaning from? And so, I have some general concerns about not having topic-related standards, and and just whether this is so voluminous that it's not going to be something that is valuable to a reader. And so again, I'm hoping that we spend enough time at the next in-person meeting to discuss these things.
I can only agree with you, Kent, that we certainly must make sure that we not only set aside the appropriate time for this discussion, but we also make sure that we put in place the necessary intermediate steps to help all of the members work through some of these issues in between now and the in-person meeting, so that when we do get together in the end of March, we will be able to feel confident about the decisions that we're asked to make then. Evan Harvey is raising his hand. Evan, please go ahead.
Just to pile on, so we have a full complement of opinion on this. I agree with Kent, and I agree with the previous point about the definition of the term salience versus risk. I think that it warrants a full discussion. If we can't do it in person, I'm going to have to go through this with a lot more detail before we meet, but there's just so much information here, and the standard is so important to get right as the sort of creator of record in this space, or potential creator of record in this space. I feel like we have a special burden to do everything as perfectly as we can. So I just feel like this, if we can somehow overweight the schedule to give this the attention that it deserves, I would be in favor of that.
Thank you, Evan. I certainly don't dispute that the challenges around absorbing what appears here and making good decisions about it will be significant. Any other questions or comments from the GSSB? Okay, can we clarify? Can we make sure that we have done what we need to do in terms of the approval that's been requested to appoint Dwight Justice as a member of the technical committee? Any further discussion about that request at this point? Okay, hearing none, I think there are some various comments of support that are visible here in the chat function. I think that that means that we have approved that appointment. Thank you. Okay, so I believe that decision has been carried now. Okay, moving along. Laura, is this still with you?
It's now passed on to Sarah Jane.
Thank you. Welcome, Sarah Jane.
Thank you. So do you want me to go ahead and introduce this new project?
Please,
right.
Sorry. Yes, yes, absolutely. If you wouldn't mind talking us through the next bit of this, please go ahead.
All right, no problem. I thank everyone for the opportunity to present this new proposal, which will result in some revisions to the universal standards. And the project has largely arisen for a few reasons. The first one we've just heard about from Laura, and that is the output and recommendations from the Human Rights Related Disclosure Project in two ways. If I can call them suggested mandated disclosures that all organizations are encouraged to report against, and where we would house those in the universal standards. We also have the recommendation of considering adoption of the due diligence approach that project looked into, and how we would incorporate that into GRI 103, our management approach. So that's a very clear output that drives us to think about the universal standards. There are two other reasons as well. Commitments have been made in the past to review some of the technical content when we move to the GRI standards from the G4 guidelines. And I guess we also have this commitment to strive for continuous improvement in the standards to make them usable, accessible to all types of reporting organizations. And finally, we want to be very clear in what we expect organisations understand when they are producing a GRI standard compliant report. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at the proposal, and you'll see that we have suggested to split the project into 4 work streams, just so that we can commence on these 4 different areas, albeit they are interrelated, and some of the outputs or recommendations from one work stream will most definitely impact upon others. Underpinning it all, we would like the opportunity to review our current format and presentation of the standards. I haven't identified that as a specific work stream. It's not technical content per se, but this does meet our objective of making the standards as accessible as possible to a wide range of reporting organisations. So I would just very quickly outline the work streams, and then I will open up for questions, suggestions. I have some points that I would specifically like your input on. So the first one is Workstream 1, which is dealing with the output and recommendations from the Human Rights Project. And then Workstream 2 is looking into potentially revising some of the reporting principles. At this moment in time, we predict they could be materiality, stakeholder inclusiveness, and topic boundary. And that may have some impacts on other reporting principles, both content, ones that define content, and ones that define quality of reporting. The third work stream, we look to revise the in accordance criteria. So the core and comprehensive options, and also potentially the use of the GRI referenced reports. Finally, GRI 102 general disclosures. This will potentially be impacted directly by Workstream 1, and where the human rights disclosures applicable to all reporting organisations will sit, and what impact that has on the length and the presentation of that standard. We'd also like to take the opportunity to look into how the existing general disclosures are reported against, and any clarifications we can make to the existing general disclosures. So I will stop there and ask if you have any questions for clarification purposes.
I will open it up to the GSSB members for discussion. I suspect there may be a similar appetite to discuss this in person in a certain amount of detail in March, as we have heard with the human rights discussion just a moment ago. Kirsten, please go ahead.
Thank you, Judy. And yes, I support that this should be discussed in our in-person meeting in March. There are very interesting work streams. I don't have any comments to the work streams as such, but of course, work stream number 1 will depend very much on the discussion we do have about the human rights suggestions from the proposal from the technical committee. For the other ones, I'm very happy to see that the in accordance criteria is included. Revise the reporting principles. I think that is very useful to do from time to time. And of course also to review and revise the general disclosures. I'm very occupied about that we do have sufficient report level of also reporting practitioners in these work streams to make sure that we are making requirements that are feasible, practical, and adds value also to the reporting organization. The last thing is not least important, because as long as we're able to to create value also for the reporting organization, the report becomes so much more valuable also to the users. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Any other questions or comments? Robin, yes, please go ahead.
Thanks, Judy. Yes, I just wanted to make a note that I think with some of these work streams, I know we'll get a chance to talk about them further in March, but I think further to what Kirsten was saying, some of those work streams would probably benefit from some field testing, perhaps, with a group of reporters, but I'm sure we can sort of work that into the discussions when we meet in person. I'm also mindful of what Kent was saying about the size and scope of some of this work cascading. So I think last time under G4, when we looked at the what was then the in accordance criteria, there was an entire sort of project working group on that alone. So I don't think we should underestimate the effort it may take in pursuing these work streams and how many touch points they'll have across all of the suite of standards and practitioners as well.
Thank you, Robin. Yes. Yes, go ahead, please. Bastian, go ahead.
Just to respond to Robin's comment in relation to, and I think it is also Kirsten who mentioned this, the field test or the involvement of report preparers. We will come up with some suggestions around that for you. We have already internally discussed that there needs to be input on different levels at different stages of this process, and we probably cannot go for public comment without having vetted this also with preparers that have sufficient knowledge about this, so the more experienced ones, but certainly also those that we intend to motivate to start to use the standard. So we will come up with a couple of suggestions. We will put this on the agenda also for the in-person meeting to discuss the approach. So under the process, we have the opportunity to hold field tests, also to organize forums around this. So there are multiple avenues that we can probably pursue. Thank you.
Thank you, Bastian. Any other hands want to be raised? Okay, Sarah Jane, back to you. Anything further on this?
A couple more points. So thank you very much for those, and they are certainly the points you've raised are front of mind, and we understand the risk of reporting burden and the impact this would have on existing reporters. So please be sure that we will take that into consideration. This is an open question. If any of you have suggestions for specific organizations or experts that we could consult with, I would be very happy to hear those suggestions. And this could be in a whole range of areas. One is us discussing the existing standards, how they're applied with users or reporters, any users of the reports, and experts, particularly when it comes to reporting models, looking at the in accordance and how we set up a model for compliance with the standards. Be very welcome to hear those.
Thank you very much. I presume, Sarah Jane, this is also something that the GSSB members can consider for a period of time and bring those suggestions to you as they occur in a timely manner.
Of course, yes. And finally, in the paper you will have read that we would like to convene a subcommittee of GSSB members who will be there in a similar capacity to those that are working with the sector program to provide overall advice and direction on the project. We have received 2 interested nominations so far, but if anyone would like to volunteer, please do let us know.
Is there a time frame for that? Is there a time frame for that, Sarah Jane? By when is it desirable to make those decisions?
I think, and I would take Bastian's steer on this, but if we had a good idea before we convene for our next GSSB meeting in a month's time, I think that would be a good time frame.
Okay. Bastian, you wanted to come in there?
Yeah, and just to say that Robin and Peter have come forward with self-nominating themselves. We have been in touch with them for the subcommittee. So a third member, that would be great if we have another volunteer for this.
Thank you very much, and thank you to both Robin and Peter for that matter. Shall we move to the approval of the project proposal then, Sarah Jane? Is that the ideal thing to do here now?
It sure is, yes.
Okay, so with the invitation still open, obviously, to send in ideas and suggestions on the matters that have been flagged here, we would like the approval of the GSSB of the draft proposal for the review of GRI's universal standards to be shared with the GRI Stakeholder Council and the GRI Board. Is there any discussion on this approval? Hearing none, I think that is approved. Thank you very much, Sarah Jane.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have, it's simply the any other business. I'm not aware of any additional matters that have been raised ahead of time before we began the meeting today. Obviously, I missed the first half hour of it, for which I'm still sorry, but perhaps there were items that were raised at that point. Are there any others that have already been flagged for discussion? Bastian, do you know of any?
No.
Okay.
No issues have been raised for that should be covered under this session.
Okay. Okay. Are there any items that GSSB members wish to raise now? Okay, I'm not hearing any. You all obviously had a lot to work on just for this meeting. And I'm very grateful to all of you for taking the time, but also for doing the preparation in advance, reading through the background documents. It is vitally important, and it makes such a huge difference. Can I ask if there are no further points to be made? I believe that brings us to the end of today's meeting. Any housekeeping matters for the standards division to remind us of, or to put in front of us, or can we simply close the meeting at this point?
Judy, this is Jill.
Yes.
Oh,
Jill.
We're just trying out our system again, and it seems to be working.
Very good.
We're not sure what happened, but we seem to have the microphones back on. So we just want you to try it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, very good. I believe that brings us to the close of today's meeting. And I hope all of you have a very good day and evening wherever you happen to be. And I look forward to speaking with you again in March.